going to be doing today. We're going to get shit done. And yeah, it's about navigating the job hunt. It's all about trying to find your place in the UX design industry, knowing what your strengths are, and how to get that job, especially in this climate right now with inflation and job loss. I think this event is very much needed. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to Melissa and Rosie. They will introduce themselves, and yeah, I'll leave it to you guys.
Thanks, Melanie. Well, hello everyone. I'll just do a quick intro. My name is Melissa Aure. I am a product design lead over at Line Interactive. Um, I, a lot of my design experience has been in graphic design, web design, and more recently transitioned into UX design. So yeah, I just have like a versatile design experience. I've been involved in hiring and recruitment for two teams now. So that's just kind of my background and context. So feel free to jump in and ask any questions along the way. I'm super excited to be here today and share with you a little bit of insight on just navigating the job hunt. I'll pass it on to Rosie.
Hey y'all, my name is Rosie. My pronouns are she, her. I am a UX writer at Rocket Companies. If you're in the US, you probably know us best by our Barbie and Anna Kendrick commercials, where Barbie's house hunting. And I founded with Melissa Team GSD in January 2021. And since then, we kind of just like got a lot of resources around job hunting and decided that we didn't want to keep it to ourselves. So I'll explain a little bit more about GSD when we get started, but yeah, that's me. Melissa, did you want to do the stream? Because I don't know that I'm as well versed as you are. Or I can try
Oh
it and you
yeah.
can let me know if it's working.
Yeah, it's working right now. Can you see it?
Oh, I have to click watch stream.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I guess I could have just started. All right, yeah. So Team GSD, Team Get Shit Done. That's our goal. We want to get shit done. We started in about January 2021, and it was just a small group of 9 people who wanted to be held accountable. And since then, we've grown to a group that has run 3 cohorts. We just finished out the last one. And what we do is just try to help people get that UX job. So whether it's improving your public speaking skills, practicing whiteboarding, improving your portfolio, making sure that your resume is readable and scannable, all of that jazz, helping you build connections where you need to. We do that by running workshops, by providing mentorship, and by providing community. And the way that we provide community is by basically just keeping it really small. So we only accept about 10 to 12 people per cohort so that they have the time to build close relationships that will guide them through the rest of their career. And so far, we've helped about 20 people get a UX job. The number's a little higher because we just closed our 3rd cohort. So I'm going to have us update that later once we get the data. But yeah, it's really exciting the fact that we've been able to help so many people achieve the same dreams that we achieved when we first started this group. Uh, okay, so today's agenda, we're going to talk about some values. These are beliefs that are core to who you are. And they're really good for anybody, whether this is your first job hunt, second, third, fifth, seventh. These are the things that guide you from job to job. We're going to talk about job criteria. So, going from applying to 200 jobs to applying to the jobs that actually matter. And then we're going to have Melissa is going to take that part 2, which is job search strategy, where she's going to cover the design process and how you can apply it to your job hunt and teach you a little bit about what the average job search funnel looks like and how to start measuring that to see if you're improving or where you need to start putting in a little bit more work. All right, with that, we're just going to hit it off. Feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along. I've never like live streamed in Discord, so I'm assuming you can put questions in a chat, but super noob here. Sorry. If you're not able to, then maybe write them down and ask us at the end. Okay, so oh yes, oh okay, I'm learning so much right now. So the values that I was referring to earlier, these are kind of the things that you need to be your best at work or to do your best work. A lot of times you can use your past work experience as a form of reference. So one of the ways that you might do that is thinking about situations that when they happened, immediately like put a red flag in your brain, or we're like, this feels like it's violating a really core piece of me. Maybe that's, your manager being disrespectful, right? Or your peers being disrespectful and not listening to you or not showing that they value your work. That might help you understand that, hey, you know what? Respect is one of my core values, and I need that from my next job. If you haven't had a job in the past, maybe start thinking about projects that you've been a part of. So, what were some of the things that either happened, people did, that immediately sort of like got you a little bit upset? Why are people doing this? This is not cool. And start listing those out. And I would say probably try to align with like three values, because you're not going to get them all. Like, truth be told, you're going to get a job, and sometimes people are going to be crappy, and you may not get everything. But try to find like what are the core ones that really, really matter to you. Another one of the values that matter to me is like work life balance. When I entered tech, I entered into, oh, we've got a little echo here. Hey, Katie Payne. I think if you mute, then maybe the echo will go away. Thanks. So one of the things that happened to me was I started at an agency, and it was really fast paced, long working hours, but I got to grow really, really fast in the 3 years that I was there. But what I learned for myself is I had no or very little work life balance. One of the things that I realized, hey, work life balance is a value for me. I don't want to work somewhere that is literally grilling me every single day. So, what I did in my job interviews was I asked the team, hey, what does work life balance mean to you, to make sure that we're aligned in the same definition? And then, do you have that at this company? And by the way that they answered, I was able to gauge, okay, this is definitely a company that I want to be at, or probably not going to work here because it's going to be the same as the issues that I had in the past. Can you click to the next one, Melissa? So here's just a little list that I made of some values that you might want to consider. So, like, maybe you want creative freedom. Agency life might be someplace that you want to go to, or a big corporation that works on a lot of different projects might be a place you want to go to so that you can move around from place to place and just try different things. Maybe you're interested in volunteering. I volunteer my time all the time. So that's definitely one of my values. And at Rocket, we actually get PTO just for volunteering. And we actually also have like an annual team volunteering event where we give back to the community. So like that very easily aligned with my values. Um, there's a whole bunch of other ones here that you can see and sort of see like, oh, does that matter to me or not? But yeah, take a moment to figure out what your values are, pick your top three, and then try to incorporate that into your job hunt. All right, next. Thank you. So now you're on the job hunt. I think a lot of people think, oh, I want to be a UX designer. And so they just apply to like 200 jobs that say UX designer. But there are other ways to make sure that you're applying to the places that actually matter to you. So before we start narrowing down, I'm going to first teach you how to like open up your job search. One of the ways that you can find more opportunity is by looking at different job titles. So not limiting yourself to UX designer or UX researcher or like my title UX writer. Looking at what other companies are using instead of that title. So I wrote a little list here for UX design. Whew, sorry, I'm having a baby and I burp a lot. So an alternative might be user experience designer, product designer, UX UI designer, UX strategist. Like there's different titles that you might find. Sometimes even like small companies might just write designer, and it sounds like it's not UX, but then you read the job description and it is UX. So that's going to open up more opportunities for you. Now, when you're ready to start getting into the job hunt and you want to start narrowing down, like, okay, what are the places that I actually want to apply to? I would say take a look at your finances first. Like, figure out, like, what is the least amount of money you need to make to pay your bills and keep up with your hobbies. Like, I don't know about you, but I have Disney Plus, I have Netflix, I have Showtime, I have HBO. Like, that was on my list. Like, I need to be able to pay all of these things every single month. And figure out what your minimum salary is. And then figure out, according to your tax bracket, how much are you actually going to take home? Because that take home pay is what you're going to use to pay for bills. There's companies out there that say, the take home pay is low, but we're going to give you more in stock options, or we're going to give you more in some other thing like a yearly bonus. But those things happen once a year and you have to wait for them. So you need to, equity, yep. So you need to make sure that the money that you're bringing home is money that can pay the bills today, right now. And once you figure that out, then go to places like glassdoor.com or community groups like Tech Ladies and start to figure out what the average salary is where you live. So, not just in the US, but also in the state that you're at. So, for example, if you're in Kansas, a UX writer, I'm just going to throw out a number here, might make 70 or 80K, totally making it up. But then the national average for UX writers is 110. But then if you're in Seattle, like me, you can get offers for like 130 to 160K, right? So, like, what is the market value where you live? And try to get as close as possible to that when you continue your job hunt. You don't want just the minimum salary. And if you can go much higher, don't think about the fact, oh, well, I only make 30K. So even if they give me 60K, that's okay. Like, no, if the average is 100K, ask for 90. Go as high as you can. Don't try to compare it to what you're making right now because tech salaries are wild. Um, okay, so with that, let's go to employment. So, what type of employment do you want? Are you willing to do contracts? Do you want to be an apprentice because you need that guidance? Are you willing to do part time or full time? Same thing for location. Do you want to go to an office? Do you want to be remote? Do you want a little hybrid scenario where you go to the office 4 times a year? I have to fly out to the East Coast every quarter for my work. I'm willing to put that work in. Are you willing to relocate within the state or out of state? Oop. Yep, that's okay. We can go there. It's okay. Are you willing to relocate? Like, ask yourself those questions because they may come up. All right, next one. I'm gonna try to go through this one as quickly as I can so Melissa can get more time. Then start looking at companies. What kind of company do you want to work at? Like, do you want to work at a corporation? If you want creative freedom, maybe you want to look at a startup, right? If you want to do good in the world or give back or volunteer more, maybe you want to look at a nonprofit. Write down what you're looking for so you can start to look into those spaces or make connections in those spaces to get a job. Then industry, right? Like maybe you don't care about crypto, but you care about e-recycling or wellness or NFTs, right? Like all of those niche industries, it's another layer of helping you find opportunities that not only matter to you, but maybe that other people are not looking for, right? And if they matter to you, you're going to have a better story when you go into those interviews because you actually care about the things that you're applying to instead of what a lot of people do, which is, I want to work at Amazon or Google or Microsoft. It's like, that's great. Why do you want to work there? I want money and they sound like a stable company, right? But you need to have a really good why. So, knowing industries that you're interested in can help you define that why even better. And by the way, these big companies do have pieces of their company that align with some of these industries. So then you can even narrow down, I want to work at Microsoft doing AR, VR. Like that's very specific. Makes more sense when you tell your story that way than just, I want to work at Microsoft. Okay, then almost done. So benefits, these are all things that you can negotiate. And you can look at things like PTO, which is paid time off. If you're coming from a different sector, in tech, we usually don't have like sick leave and paid leave. It's usually just one, which is called PTO. Depending where you go, maybe they do split them up. But yeah, like what are some of the benefits that you're interested in? Do you want unlimited so you don't have to worry about it? Do you need medical? Do you need vision? Do you need a 401k? Do you need parental leave? Like what are the things that you want? And these are all things that you can negotiate. So maybe if the pay is a little bit lower, you can always say, okay, well, since the pay is 10K less than I was expecting, how about an extra week of PTO? And you can have that little back and forth. And so you might go from wanting 100K or 90K and them offering you 80K to, okay, well, at least I'm not going to get 3 weeks. I'm going to get 4 weeks of vacation every year. All right. And the last one is just what are some of the other things maybe you kind of want to have? So I know some companies offer like a home office stipend. If you're going to be working remote, like, yeah, it's nice to have 1,000 extra bucks to get started, right? Buy your little fancy table to move up and down. Um, Maybe you want flexible hours. I know people that go to therapy and they're like, every Tuesday, 10 to 11, I'm not going to be at work. I'm going to talk to my therapist. You can talk about that. You can get that done. And again, like I mentioned earlier, volunteer hours. Like that's very important for me. I love that my job says, you know what, every year you get X amount of hours where you don't have to come to work. You can go volunteer and we'll pay you. So it's another layer of my PTO. All right. Well, with that, I'm just going to show you one example of what you can do when you're getting things ready. So earlier I mentioned look at different job titles. So I did a little bit of research and just started noticing some of the titles that were used for UX design and UX research and wrote them down. Cool. Now I have a list of all the things that I can look up to try to find the right job for me. And if you want to work in like a very specific sector of UX, maybe you change it from UX designer to service designer, right? Or maybe if you're newer, you might want to look at junior UX designer, associate UX designer, all of that stuff. So this is just an example of some of the titles that are out there. With that, I am going to pass it over to Melissa, who's going to talk about the strategy side.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Rosie. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about a job search strategy. Now, some of you are probably like, what in the world is a job search strategy? Or if you're already job hunting, you may not even have one. So let's dive into how we can help you get to that job search, have that job search strategy. So essentially, a job search strategy is just a plan to get you from point A to point B. So point A, you're either job hunting currently or you're about to start your job hunting. If you're starting your job hunt, this is a great place to really dive deep into. But even if you're on your current job hunt now, that's totally fine too. You can still use all of these tips and apply them to your current job hunt. But essentially, you want to get from job hunting to landing your first or second or whatever number role in UX. And a lot of what goes into this strategy is one, having your personal branding in place and knowing what story you're going to tell your future employers. Like Rosie mentioned, you also want to have your job criteria and values in place. That's going to really help define your strategy going forward. And then, of course, once you're hitting apply and submitting your application, you want a way to track your job hunt and all of those applications. The tracking part is critical because you can spend hours just editing your resume, your portfolio, and maybe that's not even what you need to be focusing on. So you're wasting a lot of time and energy and effort on things you don't need to be fixing. That said, let's take a look at how we can use the design process to tackle the job hunt. So you've probably seen this, and if you haven't, this is like the double diamond where you have like these four different stages when you're going through a design process. Now, I've tailored this so you can actually use it in your job hunt. So the first stage is the discover phase. So this is essentially where you're gathering all the information you can about the industry you're about to break into, UX. So the first thing you want to do is really understand the market. like Rosie mentioned previously, understanding your market value, doing the research around salary, but also just reading job descriptions so that way you know what roles and responsibilities to expect. Um, a lot of the, like, for example, UX titles, like UX designer titles, product design titles, there's some differences, but you just want to get to understand the verbiage that they're using within those job descriptions, the skills that they're asking for, and overall expectations. You want to follow role models. If you have dream companies in mind, go on LinkedIn, follow, connect with designers at that company. If you can find their portfolio or resume, all the better. Take a look at them, see what they did to get where they are today. I mean, even just message them if they don't have it like openly available. Just start that conversation with them so you have your roadmap to that dream company in place. And then, of course, part of this information gathering is understanding your unique value proposition. So, what do I mean by that? It's really knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, and the areas of growth that you want to dive into going into your new career. And then we hit the define stage. So now you understand the market and you understand yourself. Now you need to define a little bit more so that way you can prepare your applications. So defining your values and job criteria, we're going to give you worksheets after the talk so that way you can actually write those down so you know where you're applying to. And also, one thing that's really tied to that is your understanding who you're creating these things for, these deliverables and artifacts. You're not talking to your designer friends or the design, like, other UX designers. You are tailoring these deliverables and artifacts for your users, which are going to be the recruiters or the hiring manager, the hiring team. So you have to understand their pain points. They are pressed for time. They're juggling, recruiter is juggling several candidates at once. They're trying to land, they're trying to fill a role or multiple roles, actually, so they have very little time. And your hiring manager is running a team. They have several designers they have to meet on one-on-ones, they have to lead design, and they also have to run these interviews. So again, they're pressed for time. So on average, they're spending only minutes looking at these deliverables. So you want to maximize that 1 to 3 minutes of their time to curate your deliverables and artifacts in the right way. And that's where you hit the design stage. So now you're actually building these artifacts into deliverables. So what do they consist of? A resume, sometimes a cover letter. There's a lot of debate about whether to include one, whether or not to include one. So that's another talk entirely. But your portfolio and case studies slide deck. Usually that case study is used for when you're doing like a presentation during an interview. So they'll do like a panel interview where you present some of your case studies from your portfolio. And then once those are all built, I mean, you can hit apply, sure, but you want to get feedback. This is a place where you can start testing it with your users. Okay. Not, you can send it to friends for sure, but you want to make sure you're getting feedback and testing with the right people. It may not be the recruiter or the hiring manager from the company of your dreams, but there's resources out there where you can connect with them. Like LinkedIn is a great place to reach out to recruiters, to hiring managers, or even like ADP list is another great one. Or you just want to reach out to the right people who have had hiring experience so that way they can look at your resume, cover letter, portfolio in that light and give you tailored feedback. Moving on to the next stage. So we have the deliver phase. Once you've designed everything and you've gotten your feedback, you've iterated, you can go ahead and hit apply. And now you're ready to submit your application, but don't just hit submit and then let it be, okay? Don't go in your job hunt blind. You want to track your progress over time using the job tracker that we're going to be providing you with later to review the data and insights from your job hunt. Now, you can go in blind, but then you'll end up applying to like 400 plus applications, especially in the market today, or you can constantly evaluate and iterate so you're not doing that. And this is going to help you refine based off of whether or not you're hitting your baseline. And you'll learn a little bit more what I'm talking about in the next few slides. So let's drill into this design and deliver part of the double diamond. So For the design stage, again, building your resume and portfolio, these are just resources to really help you curate your resume in the right way. So I recommend this to anybody searching for a job, whether it's your first role in UX or your second, third, whatever. JobScan is this tool, so it allows you a couple of free scans, but it is a freemium tool. You have to pay a little bit more if you want more access to it and better things. But essentially, you would take your resume, upload it, and then take the job description for the company you're applying to, and then it essentially scan both your resume and the job description, and then give you a match compatibility score. And that's going to tell you how close you are to hitting the mark, um, based off of keywords and the title of the job. So it scans the job description for some skills like keywords that frequently occur. And you want to make sure that you're tailoring your resume to include some of those. Obviously, you don't want to lie, but you want to include the ones that you have experience with and find a way to input them into the resume. Because on the recruiter side, they do see your resume, but they also can see this kind of score dependent on the like ATS system that they use. They can likely see a score, and you just want to try to get um, that as high as possible by using those keywords. And then some free versions of that is like Word Cloud or Tag Crowd. You just input the job description and it'll show you what frequently used keywords are there. So you want to try to tailor that into your resume. So it's a little bit of legwork in the beginning, but it's so worth it. A few minutes of your time can definitely improve your chances of getting your resume passed over to the next round. And then, of course, part of that, here are the resources that I mentioned earlier. You can look at ADP List, and then UX Coffee Hours is another free one. There is a paid version of this mentorship style called Mentor Cruise, but they do offer mentorship for all the UX disciplines. But again, you want to share your deliverables and artifacts with the right people just to get the appropriate lens on them. And then, of course, I'm going to keep on saying this. Once you've applied, don't go in blind. Evaluate your job process as you go and iterate. So, I'm going to introduce a job search funnel to give you a little bit of insight on what to expect of the job hunt, like in the entire process, and some numbers. I want to put everything from like a data context so that way you can understand what I'm talking about. And then from that, understanding the data, you can have this benchmark. What numbers do you need to hit in order to get to the next stage or get that offer? You want to constantly be A/B testing different resumes. If you have an idea like, oh, I think this resume is going to work better than the other one, don't use the same resume for every single job. You maybe want to test out one resume with like 10 different companies, test out another resume with 10 other companies, and really just like see which one performs better. That's like ideal ideal case. But I know it can be time consuming, but if you really like data and numbers, then feel free to do that. Um, and now let's actually dive into what this job search funnel actually looks like. So you'll see in this like pyramid funnel type image, we have 5 different stages. So the first stage is your application. This is you hitting submit, applying to a job. Now, from those applications, a number of them will be moved to the next round, which is typically a phone screen with a recruiter or a hiring manager. It just really depends on the company, like UX maturity, the resources, the budget, all that stuff. But from the phone screen, you'll typically be moved to a hiring manager interview round where they'll get to know a little bit more about your experience and your background. And then from there, you have this interview loop. Now, this is where it really varies. I've just kind of lumped everything into interview loop. This can consist of everything from like a panel interview where you're presenting your case study to like several different team members, a culture teams interview, a design challenge, CEO interview. It just really depends on the company and their resources. And then last but not least, once you get through the interview loop, the offer is the last stage of this funnel. So now that you know a little bit about what each stage consists of, let's take a look at some industry conversion rates. So, what I mean by conversion rate is just essentially how you move from one stage to the next. So, let's say you applied to 120 jobs. So, you submitted 120 applications. So on average, that's about a 10%. You want to get at least a 10% conversion rate. Okay. Now 10%, that's average. Okay. It all of these numbers are really, really dependent on the market. So, if you've been active on LinkedIn, there's a lot of layoffs happening. Um, we're kind of going this like economic downturn. So the market's really tough right now, just tougher than it usually is. I mean, for junior roles, it's always been competitive, but it's even more competitive now just because there's not as many junior roles out there for the amount of people that are applying. So 10 is like an average. You don't want to try to get less than 10, okay? So 10 is average. You want to be hitting a conversion rate of like 20 or higher. I mean, if you can get to 30, that's kind of ideal, right? 30 or higher is ideal. But in this case, okay, let's say, you applied to 120 or you submitted 120 applications at a 10% conversion rate. Of those 120, let's say you move to the next round 12 times. So you have 12 out of 120. That's a 10% conversion rate. And now you've made it to the screener round. Now, from those 12 screeners, this is where it begins to convert a little higher, right? So you've done the screener, and this is on average, you're going to get like a 50% conversion rate. So from 12 screeners at a 50% conversion rate, you're going to make it to the next round about six of those 12 times to the hiring manager interview round. And from the hiring manager round, this is another 50% conversion rate. So of those six, you'll make it to the next round about three of those times, 3 out of 6 times to the interview loop. And remember, for the interview loop, that can be like a series of multiple different interviews. So I just kind of lumped them together. Essentially, the conversion rate for that going into the offer becomes 30%. So of the 3 interview loops, or that last stage of interviews, you'll expect a 30% conversion rate, and that would be like one offer, right? So if you, again, this is industry averages. This is what's commonly happening to a lot of folks. But of course, if you're putting in the time and effort into the right places, you're doing the strategy, you're putting in the work, you can achieve higher conversion rates, and overall, the applications could be a lot lower per offer. So you can put in, 50 applications, and you could still possibly get 3 offers. That is possible if you're just investing in the right places. You'll have higher conversion rates, but again, this is just what's expected of the average. So if you remember from the double diamond process, that last stage was the deliver phase, where you're actually evaluating your process and constantly iterating on it. Don't wait until you're like at 120 plus applications to evaluate your process. If I were you, I'd be evaluating like every 25. You want to audit your system as many times as you can, so that way you're always strategically doing the right things. So let's say, let's say you didn't evaluate, right? You hit 120 applications and you're getting a lower than 10 to 20% conversion rate. So you're only passing through 6 of those rounds, or you're only getting like a screener call for 6 out of those 120 applications. So what does that mean? If your conversion rates are low, that likely means that you need to iterate on your resume or your portfolio if you're not making it to as many screeners. So basically, that means that the hiring manager, the recruiter, they're seeing your application and they're just like immediately rejecting it. They're not moving you to the next round. So that can mean that they're looking at your resume and just saying a hard no. Okay. So, or they are looking at your resume and your portfolio, and then they get to your portfolio and they're like, no. One way you can kind of test this is if you have Google Analytics installed on your website or your portfolio. Let's say you applied to 120 places, and your unique website visitors, so how many people are visiting your website, is nowhere near the number. Let's say only 5 people clicked on your website out of the 120 that you submitted. That means that your resume is probably the culprit. They are not landing in your portfolio at all. They're just looking at the resume and immediately saying no. So again, you can use JobScan to curate your resume with those keywords and increase your match capability or compatibility score. And then you could also, that also means that maybe on your resume, you don't even have real world experience. You just have education projects or you haven't done any volunteering. Oftentimes that's the case. That's the reality. You have to have like real world experience, whether it be volunteering or, just like a side project. It's always best to go in it. That's how you stand out for most candidates. And then, of course, you don't have like any quantitative data on there. That's super easy to see for recruiters. They're like, oh, okay, this person, improved this process by 30%. We want to see little to no, like, we want to see those impact metrics. So if you don't have them, that's another reason why you might not be moving on to those phone screens. And then, last thing about this particular stage is, again, looking at your website. If you do have Google Analytics installed, you can actually look at your website bounce rate. So when you submit your resume, you usually include your portfolio link, right? So they land on your homepage. A bounce rate is essentially the first page that they get onto. Let's say they land on your homepage, that's the first page they land on. If they don't go to any other page and they just leave your website, that's a bounce. We consider that a bounce. So if that bounce rate is high, so on average, the bounce rate is around 40%. If it's way above 40, then they're not even getting to your case studies. They're looking at your portfolio and immediately going, nope, bye. So we don't want that. We want them to at least click on a case study. So once they get there, you can see on average how much time they're spending. So average time on page is another metric to look at. On average, hiring managers spend about like 2 to 5 minutes. The range can be, but it's a short range. Like looking through your case studies, they don't spend a lot of time. It's very short. But if they're only spending like 20, 30 seconds, and you see that metric, your average time on page is around like, way lower than that 2 minutes, then they're likely just looking at your case study, not even reading it, and then leaving. So those are just some cues to let you know, oh, okay, I'm not making it to these screener calls, which means that they're looking at either my resume or portfolio and they're not liking what they see. So that's focusing your energy on those specific areas versus like the whole entire job search. Now, going into the next stages, if you remember, you have the screener, you have the hiring manager interview, and then your interview loop. So all three of these stages of the job search funnel is solely going to be reliant on your interviewing skills. So not passing, you essentially want to be passing to the next round for each of these. The average is like 30 to 50%. So if you're hitting anything below that, you might need to work on your interviewing skills. So that could mean being able to talk to your strengths, accomplishes, and career story. Do you have that down packed? Like, do you have a clear path, a clear career story, elevator pitch, all those things? Are you showcasing your skills in the right way? Are you highlighting your experiences in the field? If you're transferring from another career, um, then making sure that you're talking to your transferable skills. And then, of course, showcasing the value that you bring to a team. You have XYZ skill, and that's why it's really valuable for your team. It looks like you're trying to solve this problem on X team. This is how I can do that for you. Framing yourself in that light to solve their problems. Again, you're solving the user's problems. And then if you've already heard, you might have heard about the STAR framework. So you'll encounter three different kinds of questions here: behavioral, situational, and technical. So for the behavioral questions, that's like, how would you collaborate with a team? How do you deal with difficult challenges? Or what if somebody disagreed with your design? Uh, whereas situational is they would ask you more questions related to, what would you do if I gave you this design problem? How would you ideate? Um, or if I gave you this user information, how would you design a solution? Like they give you situations that are consistently found in like their day to day. Then of course technical is just being able to speak to your experiences, right? Showing your skill set and how it aligns with their job description or their needs for that company. And then for the behavioral side of things, you can use the STAR framework. If you're not familiar with that, that's just situation, task, action. Gosh, what is the R? I'm like blanking. Result. Yeah. So look that up online. If you don't know what the STAR framework is, definitely use that framework and Google it so that way you have an actionable way to tackle these behavioral questions. And just to speak to the conversion rates again, so if you're falling off at any of these, so you're not converting at least 50% to the next round. So let's say you've applied or you've made it to the screener for 12 different companies, but you're not hitting 6 for the hiring amount. You're not moving to the next stage at least 6 times. Let's say anything less than that. You need to look at your behavioral, situational, technical interview skills. And last but not least, let's see. Oh, yeah, that's pretty much it. I want to open the floor up for questions. But actually, before I do, I just want to show you exactly what this looks like in the worksheet that I'm going to be sharing, so that way you can take a look at how this works on a practical level. So give me a second to share my screen in another tab. Okay, so this is what to expect. Sorry, wrong one. Okay, so Rosie mentioned that we have a job criteria worksheet. So you're going to be getting this portion right here, which, oh, wow, that was strange. I guess that was an old version.
Sorry, the old one wasn't updating. It just updated.
Okay, that was weird, but it's okay. So you have your job criteria worksheet, and essentially you can input all that information, what you're looking for. And then you have your job activity tracker portion, which is essentially where you can set a goal for the week. So this always automatically updates every week. Let's say you have a weekly goal of 5 applications a week, you can change that number. And then these are all calculated metrics. So this is all dependent on what you input in the job activity tracker. So this is where you can track everything from company, the status, last activity date, and then whether or not you're making it to these rounds. There's a lot of different ways that you can use these columns right here. I have some notes. So if you hover over the areas that have like a little black tab, you can see the notes. You can add a day like, oh, I had my screener call on, let's say 6:23. Oops. 22. And then you applied for this role this Monday. You'll be able to see that activity update here. So you put in one application and you made it to one screener. So now you're converting at a 100% rate. So yay, okay, that's great. So these will update automatically. If you click into a cell that is not editable or shouldn't be edited because it'll mess with the formula, it'll just give you a warning. Now, again, if you remember the funnel, you had these percentages. I mentioned that 10 is like a baseline average. Now, if you want to go above and beyond and be above average, you want to hit 30% or higher. So let's say you want to change this to 30%. So you can change that to 30%. And that just means that out of the 120 applications that you submit, you're going to be passing to the next round 36 times. So you want to hit that number, right? So if you're making it from the application to the screener, that means that you're doing something right on your resume or portfolio. Again, if you can download Google Analytics, it's easier to tell whether it's your portfolio that's the problem or your resume that's the problem. And so that's just an easy way to kind of look into those insights and use data to inform your decisions. Okay, so I'm going to convert this back to 10, but that's essentially how you would use the job tracker. You can always reach out to Rosie or I if you ever have any questions. Oh, sorry. But yeah, I'm going to just open up the floor for questions now. I know we had a lot of content, and I know it's just a matter of digesting all this information. So please feel free to unmute yourself, drop a question in the chat. Happy to answer anything that you might have for us. Let me take a look at the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, ladies. I actually do have a question because for me, I've been submitting my portfolio by PDF to a lot of recruiters or just job applications in general. So I'm missing that analytical component, which would be helpful if I had like my website ready. What is your advice in trying to track success if you don't have tracking metrics for showcasing your case study or your portfolio?
Yeah. So I had a quick question. How do you just submit like the PDF like let's say you submitted via LinkedIn, or is it like a PDF uh like in an uploader? How do you do that? Typically
It
just
would either be like an email attachment, or if I'm applying on Indeed, I could just drop it in and it just sends it
oh,
to
okay.
the employer. I also have
Mm-hmm.
copies of my PDF portfolio on my LinkedIn, so recruiters could also download my profile as well as my evidence as well.
Yeah, because I've tried doing a PDF before. So I had it uploaded onto my Google Drive. And then one thing that you can do is so that's the tricky part, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of gaps in which if you're using like a PDF, um, I think it typically works for more seasoned designers. But I've found, like, after talking to hiring managers, that they expect like a portfolio link or some kind of link to go to. Now, if you are using a PDF, let's say you upload it, I guess the best case scenario would be, let's say you upload it to Google Drive,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get that link. But
Mm-hmm.
one way to track if somebody's actually using that link is
Mm-hmm.
using Bitly. So
Mm-hmm.
Bitly is like you can upload it. I don't think it's free. I think if you want to like deep dive into the insights, it's going to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
But any one of those like link trackers, you can, let's say, take that Google link, put it into Bitly, and then it'll tell you how many people are clicking on that link.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a
So
good
that's
idea.
kind of one way. Yeah, that's like one way around. Like if you submit via PDF, if you upload it on Google Drive, you can get that link and then track it that way. Unfortunately, if it's just like a PDF, it does make it a little bit trickier because you can't be like, well, can you give me feedback? Because they likely don't have time to give feedback, especially
Right.
in the early stages of the interview process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Does
Yeah, no
anyone else have
problem.
any questions?
Let's see. I
Yeah,
think
I have
I
a
saw
question.
some
Can you
picture.
guys? Oh,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
um, hi. So there was a part where you mentioned like having data analytics or like having like conversion metrics on your portfolio. So far I only have like projects I did in my boot camp, and then the one real world project that we did is for an app that hasn't been published yet. So there's no way to really like get metrics or like anything out of that. So I've been kind of mulling over how to add in numbers into my portfolio, and I just wanted to know like how to really go about that, and how to go about like seeking like volunteer and freelance things, because it feels a bit daunting to me personally as like a a new person to the space. So yeah, those are my questions.
Yeah, I can speak to the data, and then Rosie, if feel free to unmute at all if you have any insight on the volunteering. But in, are you talking about like the impact metrics on your portfolio, uh, just like the results portion of it?
Yes. So
Okay.
yeah, to have like the impact metrics on there, basically.
Yeah. So that happens frequently. That's a great question, common question that you encounter. Now, for those projects that you've done in those boot camps, have you done evaluative testing? Um, if you have like those usability metrics, if you those are impact metrics. It can show that you've iterated, and here are the metrics. Here's kind of laying out that foundation. Another way that you could do this that I've heard has been somewhat helpful for new entry level designers has been to like about how many wireframes you've created. Uh, that's one. Like I've seen a portfolio that was like, oh, created 120 different wireframes, iterated 5 times, right? So it's just like anything that you can put a number on is usually quite helpful. So, and then, or even if, let's say, you got a review from a company, maybe you're not at that stage where, let's say, you created a website, but you don't really have any metrics yet because you just launched a website, you don't have any analytics um, that you've been able to pull from the client yet. So, I mean, even a review, anything that can show that the project was successful, and even if it wasn't successful, like how you're going to be able to take that, not necessarily failure, but that lesson and implement it in your future practice. Um, and to be honest, when you're actually applying for like an entry level junior role, if the hiring managers are like, oh, well, we expect XYZ metric, that's just like unrealistic expectation. It's great to have. Yes, it's a bonus, of course. You stand out to them because that's like not something most entry level or junior designers are actively thinking about. So I wouldn't feel too bad about it. Just apply to more companies. You'll find a company that understands that, and that's why like having those values and criteria in place is really helpful in the get go. And then, yeah, Rose, if you want to take away the volunteer question.
I'm going to add to what you just said a little bit. Like Melissa was saying, as a new person in UX, your manager or hiring person should not expect you to have all of the bougie fancy metrics that you might have when you actually launch a project in real life. So one of the things that I tell people to try to focus on is like, what are some of the principles of design that you stuck to, right? So like, I think if you go to Nielsen Norman, I'll find the article. They have the 10 design heuristics. So like creating error messages or having good color contrast or what's another one, like spacing, like just all of these things that like are design principles that you want to do well in any project. How many of those did you actually meet in your project? Because when you are working at a corporation, even before you launch things, these are the things that you're going to use to convince people that your design is the best design or that the decisions you made are the right decisions for the product before you go into testing. Because before you test, right, sometimes you have to create a mock up or you have to create a prototype for research to actually test. So leaning into those principles and saying like these are the principles that I stuck to teaches them like, okay, this person not only went to a boot camp and learned the basic stuff about UX and how to make wireframes and how to make a moderator guide for research or how to run a usability test, but they're also applying the principles that we apply every day and that we expect from every single level of designer. So I would definitely try to look into those and note how many of them you applied. And then another metric that you could do is like a so there's a place called WCAG. It's really hard to pronounce. But they basically create web accessibility guidelines. So if you are really into accessible design, then there's a lot of sites where you can like plug in your website. Let's say if it recently launched or you made it on your portfolio, and it'll give you like a hey, this website meets 89% of our standards for accessibility. And you can put that number like that is how well you did. You met 89%. And then later you can talk about here's how I bridge the percent that I still had that was missing, right? That 11%. How can you get there? So that's one of the things I would try to do as a new person, lean into those principles and talk about how you lean into them. And then when it comes to volunteer, I know that there's a couple of companies. Tech Fleet is one that comes to mind, but you can also talk to, local businesses. Do you want to get paid or not? I don't know. That's a really big debate. Personally, when I was starting out, I was willing to help people for free just so that I could have something to put down. But I think whatever method you choose, whether you're approaching a business, big or small or whatever, um, create some sort of expectation. So don't just go in there and say, I'm a UX designer, I'm trying to get a case study for my portfolio, I'd love to build you a website. Yes, that is the initial conversation you should have, but you got to put guidelines. I know somebody that created a website, and literally 3 years later, the business owner emailed them for more updates because they didn't make it clear that it's like, hey, this is how long I estimate this project to be, and once it's done, it's done. Right? And that sounds ridiculous. Like, oh, well, obviously, like people know that when I'm done, I'm done. No, like, lay that out. What are the things that you're not willing to do? Right? If you say you're gonna build a website, tell them that you're gonna build it in Webflow, or tell them that you're gonna build it in WordPress. Like, select the thing that you know how to use instead of them coming back and saying, well, we only use WordPress. Okay, well, maybe that's not the job for you if you don't know how to use WordPress, right? So just set some guidelines to protect yourself. Um, I don't have a contract right now, but I have made contracts in the past. So feel free to message me if you're like, can I get like some sort of like contract that I can look at to sort of send somebody? It sounds like it's extra and super official, but it will save you.
Yeah.
And you can always walk away.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if this question was asked. I had to step away for a second, but um, I'm asking this question on behalf of other people who might be struggling in this area. What if you don't know what your values are and you don't know what kind of job or what your focus should be in your career? Um, let's say there are many different pathways that you could take. You could be a developer, you could be a designer, maybe you have aptitude in both. How do you like make a decision and then just choose one path?
Okay, so story time. When I was switching from being a UX generalist to trying to be a specialist, I loved UX research. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I really want to be a UX researcher, but I also want to be a UX writer. Like, I love both of these things. So I made two resumes. I didn't limit myself. I made a UX research resume, I made a UX writer resume. I made a portfolio that showcased a UX research case study and a UX writing case study. And then I just sent the applications out. And I was like, we'll see whatever the universe brings to me. And then that's where I'm going to go. Unfortunately, I still had to make a decision because I mean, fortunately, right? I got to the final rounds of two jobs. But one was as a UX researcher, and the other was as a UX writer. Obviously, we know which one I chose. So I'm gonna try to remember the exercise that I did and put it in the chat. Maybe it'll take me a few minutes. But basically, I just wrote two paragraphs, and I said like, I am a UX researcher, right? I am a job title at company name. I work with, and then I wrote like, product managers, other researchers, and blah blah blah. Just three categories, real quick. Um, I deliver, and then I just put some of the deliverables that I might deliver in my work. So, like good copy or research artifacts and all of that jazz. And jazz just means stuff. Um, and then I read each one out loud. So, I read the one for UX research, and I kind of just sat with it and listened to, like, how does my body react when I read this?
Hmm.
And then I took a few minutes and I switched to the UX writer position that I had written. And I sat with that
Mhm.
and I listened, like, oh, how did my body feel?
Mhm.
And then I went back and thought about how did my body feel when I made the change. And I realized I felt really sad, a little bit sad when I read the UX researcher one. Sorry, the UX writer one, and I was like, oh, okay, if I'm feeling sad, why am I feeling sad? And it was because I felt like if I had chosen the research, I
Mm.
would have given up on writing and it just would not have made me as happy as pursuing writing. So
Mhm.
even though I had a ton of experience doing research, I really wanted that challenge of doing writing. And that exercise helped me open that up.
Mm.
When it comes to values, I think I mentioned earlier, like you can reference projects that you've done. Honestly, reference your family too. Like my family can be super disrespectful sometimes. So like That's very clear. I demand respect. I need to be respected.
Yeah.
Um, so you can think to like other relationships you have with family or with friends. Um, and like when things like when there's friction there, like
Mhm.
what are the things that are causing that friction for you? But otherwise, if you're not sure, get that first job, and then you're gonna start figuring it out real quick what you do accept into your life and what you no longer want to accept into your life.
Mhm. Would you also recommend like journaling as an exercise as well to kind of like keep a list of things that you notice in your job search, like things that kind of made you sad, like you said, or things that make you happy? Do you think that journaling is a good exercise for helping people to discover themselves if they don't know themselves that well?
It can be if you're a journaling type of person. I'm not. I
Okay.
I talk to my friends and I
Mhm.
talk my feelings out, and then they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I hear that you're feeling this way, and like that sounds kind of crappy. Have you tried this?" Or like, "This is my experience." And sometimes I just want somebody to listen. And
Mhm.
if you don't want to like offload, you can go to a therapist.
Mhm.
I also have my Pikachu.
Yes.
I will talk to Pikachu through my problems at work or through whatever issues I might have. And sometimes talking out loud helps you realize what the real problem is,
Mhm.
right? Because sometimes you're all in your emotions and everything is just like chaos. When you
Mm.
talk it out, for me, maybe journaling it out for you, maybe typing it out in a Notion or a Word doc,
Mhm.
whatever helps. Try different things. Look at what other people do. And yeah, rubber ducking. Yeah, I went to a software engineering boot camp, so I learned rubber ducking, but I prefer my Pikachu instead
Well,
of a rubber duck.
what is a rubber duck? Rubber ducking?
Okay, so it's a technique that's used in software development where you get a rubber duck or whatever, your microphone, right?
Mhm.
Whatever, some object, and you explain the code issue that you're having, or
Mm.
you read aloud the code line by line to the thing, and that will help you build clarity on the problem that you have. So a rubber duck, you can put whatever parameters. Pikachu doesn't understand mortgages. Pikachu doesn't understand the laws like TRID, HUMDA. Yeah. So I put parameters on what Pikachu can and cannot understand so that I'm basically talking to like someone who's 5 years old. That's another example.
Oh, okay.
And I explain the problem I'm having at work or the problem I'm having for myself. Melissa knows I was practicing this presentation with Pikachu to see like, where do I suck? Where do I need to improve?
Mm.
And yeah, that'll help you sort of make this complex, chaotic thing into this simplified thing for your rubber duck or your Pikachu. Um, and once you start simplifying it, you can get to the root of the issue you're trying to solve and teach yourself something
Mhm.
new.
That's really
Oh,
good.
snap. Annabelle, were you like a realtor or a broker?
Um, uh, sorry, my it took me a while to unmute. But not necessarily. I was working with Better Mortgage, so one of Rocket's yeah. So I was working with them for some time. I had to learn all about the mortgage industry, and Trid and Humda were like a nightmare to me learning everything about it. But it's like now I remember it. Anytime someone mentions it, I'm like, ah, I know what that is. So yeah,
Yeah, Pikachu doesn't know.
All
I wish
right.
I was
So,
Pikachu.
um, was the link to the assets copied and pasted already? Like, did you share that with Okay, okay, that's cool. Alrighty. So, do we have any more questions for our hosts?
Yeah, hi, this is Joe. Thanks
Mhm.
for the presentation. I do have a few questions for you. Do you have any particular sites that you suggest to apply for jobs? And also, my second question is, how can you be better prepared for the behavioral part of the interview?
Yeah, I can take this away. So job boards, there's so many different ones. I would say you want to diversify. I mean, personally, I liked LinkedIn. just because for some job applications you can see who the hiring like the recruiter is. Like sometimes that person is tied to the job description, and you can easily just like click on the company like link and then click on people, and you can see and search by like title within that company. So it's a little bit easier to use LinkedIn, especially because um, it's just that's what LinkedIn is made for. You can search for active roles, and there's constantly a lot of people like posting jobs. Like a great trick is to follow people who constantly post about like UX jobs. Like I know this several people that always just like share. They just share open job openings, and when I see that on my feed, I go, oh well, this is the direct hiring manager who's saying they're posting a job. Let me leave a comment on this post and also like follow them or connect with them, so that you know about open roles in the future, but also um, because now you have an easy connect. You have the person's name and they're hiring for that specific company. You can reach out to them like via email. So LinkedIn is a great one, of course, but again, you want to diversify. There's several different job boards. I think one was like UX Jobs. This is another one on LinkedIn that you can follow. Um, I haven't used Indeed. Um, I know that there's several people that I've talked to that have found jobs on Indeed, but at least in like the tech world, I'd say LinkedIn is probably the best bet. Um, but there's several others. I can't think of them at the moment. I know there's like I don't remember the exact link. It's like remote work or something where you can find um, Angel List is another place if you're interested in startup life. Y Combinator has like a job section if you're really like if you're interested in startups. Angel List is a great place. Y Combinator. There's also like these job boards or like job trackers that have ingrained job boards in them. So one that I've used in the past was called Placement. I really like Placement because it gives you interview guides. It gives you kind of like playbooks where you can practice your interview skills. You can write them out. You can like do voice notes too. So it's like you're speaking to somebody. Um, but they have like an ingrained job board that pulls from a lot of different databases. So it's really just like diversifying. Um, and also, I mean, it looks like you guys have a job board here. So joining those Slack channels, joining those Discords, because there's active like um, it, usually you'll find like the hiring team or somebody, a designer of that company posting in that Slack or Discord group. And they're posting it. So obviously you can right away reach out to them and say, hey, I have some questions about this specific role. And then I think I talked too much about that point. So what was the second question?
Sure.
Do you remember?
Yeah, the second question is how can you be better prepared for the behavioral and technical interview portion?
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm gonna be frank. The best way to practice that is to just practice with, the best case scenario would be with somebody who has had experience hiring, um, or the next best thing is just finding other accountability. Yeah, find your little. For me now, when I practice the presentation, I practice with my new baby. I was just talking to them out loud, but mapping out your thoughts. One, I have like one specific framework that I've used. It's like a stories framework. If you YouTube like 10 stories, a job hunt or something like that on YouTube, I've created a version of it where essentially I will create general categories, right? So they want to hear about collaboration, like how do you work in teams? How do you work? How have you worked with um, developers, other designers, writers, researchers? Okay, maybe you haven't worked with them, but how have you worked in a team with similar members, right? You want to have like your general categories like collaboration. And actually, I do have another resource. So I have another resource that breaks down these buckets too, like collaboration. What's the other one? Challenges, successes, and wins. So I have like you break it down, and then you can write down the stories. And essentially, let's say you have like 10 stories. These will all easily translate to different questions.
you're not going to be able to answer every single question. Like that's every company phrases it differently. But if you can generate like at least a template, like some stories to target, okay, well, this is how I've worked with challenging team members, right? They say, oh, well, how have you experienced a challenge with developers? You're like, no, I never worked with developers before, but here's how I worked with a challenging teammate and how I navigated that, right? So um, I always say map out what those experiences look like. If you want that resource, just reach out to me. You could private message me, add me as a friend on Discord, um, or just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I don't have the resource right now, so I'd have to find it. But yeah, practice helps a lot, and using like a general framework for many different questions. Because if you're practicing like 100 different questions, that's very, very difficult to like memorize. And I see some activity going on in the chat. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I put your LinkedIn. I didn't know if you wanted something else. I
Oh
put my
yeah,
Twitter.
that works.
Like, I'm all over Twitter. I don't really post on LinkedIn, so.
Okay, great. If we have any more questions, feel free to shout out. Otherwise, I will copy some of the links that were shared from this presentation and put it into the library text channel. And also, if you joined in on this talk and you missed what was said earlier, there will be a recording of this session as well, and we'll post it to YouTube. Alrighty. So
I
do
had
we? Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no, it's all right.
Um, I had a question about LinkedIn specifically. I've seen on there before that you should like put the title that you want in your LinkedIn profile. Like I'm a career transitioner. And so like I put in there user researcher with a background in education. Is that like okay or is that being dishonest?
Oh, totally okay.
I
Yeah.
think that's fine.
If you're like there's some, like even if you're like aspiring to be a UX researcher, just scrap that aspiring. Like that's your intended role. Like it's okay. You're building the experiences for that role. That's the job that recruiters are going to be. That's a job title recruiters are going to be searching for. And so obviously, if you have like taken educational, if you have a boot camp or if you had some infield experience, whether you're a kind of career transitioner or not, put it in your job title. That's the easiest way that they're going to find you. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't include it, and you're not lying because that's the role you want.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I had gotten a lot more interactions, and then people were like, "You have so much experience in user research," and I'm like, "I was pretty clear that my experience is as an educator," and so I was like, "Okay," I just wanted to make sure I wasn't being dishonest.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we've helped UX researcher previously, and a lot of their experience was like in the field, like primary research, but for the medical industry. And like it's just really framing those transferable skills into UX. Like, okay, you weren't working like specifically on a product; you're doing more like service design throughout the like uh, for that medical company. Like it's all transferable if you just speak to it in the right way.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
This is just something that I've experienced from going through rounds of interviews. It hasn't worked out for me because quite often the interviews are really quite positive, and then I find out afterwards that they realize that I don't have enough experience for the role. Um, is there a way to counter that when it comes to responding to feedback that suggests that your lack of years of experience is a hindrance rather than your skills or your talent?
Sorry, I'm just taking a minute to process. Um,
Yeah, sorry, it's a deep question, a deep dive question. Uh,
yeah, yeah, no, no, no.
So I'll start if you want to take some time to process. Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of layers here. Like sometimes it doesn't matter what you do. Like to be honest,
mm-hmm.
if you have a hiring manager who just doesn't want to give people a chance, is really strict about you need to have 6 years and I can only take somebody with 6 years. Like that is a person that's you're never gonna break. It doesn't matter
Mm.
what you say, you will never break them, you will never change their mind. It
Mhm.
is not a you problem, it is a their problem.
Mhm.
Um, with that being said, I've seen it being positioned in different ways.
Mhm.
One of the one of the ones that I see the most is like talking about how passionate you are. I know people say they're always passionate, but like really displaying that passion. Like, what are some of the projects that you did? What are some of the ways that you went above and beyond from other UX designers or other UX researchers or other UX writers
Mhm.
that show that like you're really in this 100%,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes it's talking about the path that you took to get there. We had somebody that submitted a story to Microsoft Leap program
Mhm.
about their design journey, and it started with like them doing their what is it, like her little sister's hair or something,
Mhm.
and so like just all performing constant act of service for her family,
Mhm.
and how that led her to not only creating values of that were centered around acts of service, but also that were in line with the things that she found in UX design that she did throughout her entire life that were related to that. And that was meaningful for them.
Mhm.
That made them deeply connect. And she had a really good story. Like, she went into the interview and they were like, "You're the hair person." You know,
Mhm.
like they immediately remembered her from
Mhm.
her hair story. Um, Other ways that you can do that are an advice I recently gave on a Twitter space about UX writing, but you can switch this to research or design. Is there's a challenge that's presented. There's a 15-day UX writing challenge, and it's from a website called dailyuxwriting.com.
Mhm.
And it basically tells you like day one, here's your challenge. These are the maximum characters you can have. This is what you're trying to solve for. Please write copy for it. The end.
Mhm.
What a lot of people do is they take that challenge. I think the first one is an airplane challenge, right?
Mhm.
Your flight's been canceled. Tell the person that their flight has been canceled.
Mhm.
And they'll create the header copy, they'll create the body copy, and then they'll create the CTAs, right? The little buttons.
Mhm.
Book a new flight, contact us, whatever you want to call it. And then that's it. That's all they do. And
Mhm.
then they're like, well, I stayed within the character limits and I had a good friendly tone, or I had a serious tone because it's a serious conversation. But everybody does that. So how are you different? So some of the
Mhm.
things I've said were like, look up the industry, look at the flight industry, look at Alaska Airlines,
Mhm.
look at Southwest Airlines, look at Virgin Airlines. They have way different types of branding, right? Make your project aligned to a real company. Maybe even like reach out to like product managers that work at Alaska Airlines.
Mhm.
And while they can't tell you everything because they can't give away company secrets, they can tell you a little bit about how flights work, how flight cancellation works. So now you're building that industry knowledge, you're building collaboration, and while you did not directly work with a product manager or a developer or whatever, you can speak to the fact that you went out of your way to connect with these people
Mhm.
and to get as close as possible to the type of work that you'd be doing in your actual job.
Mhm.
That is going to stand like way, 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 way out. Like you went way above and beyond than what anybody was expecting. So showing ways that you're going above and beyond, showing ways that show that you're different, a really good way. Another thing I've seen people do is, so I used to be a teacher. I taught kindergarten for 4 years. And, I could have probably gone into like ed tech
Mhm.
and been able to speak to the fact that my teaching experience could inform my UX experience, right? And so being able to say, like, hey, I have all of this past experience that maps to the product you're building, or maps to the industry you're working in, or maps to the audience that you serve, can also make you stand out as a yeah, stand out as an applicant, but also show them like, okay, so they don't have all of the experience, but dang, they're really passionate, or wow, they went out of their way, or
Mhm.
they're bringing all of this extra skills that we could really use. Like those are the top three ways that I've seen that handled.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and just like to add just a little bit to that, I've had the experience where I've applied for senior roles and I have not had like direct UX. Like my title has not been UX for, 5 years. So they'll be like, oh, well, some companies were like, you don't have 5 years of UX experience. You only have like, 2.5 years of UX experience. And then the rest of it is like graphic design, visual design, branding stuff. And so that's the nature of those companies. Like, I'm like, well, like despite how I explain my transferable skills, they just were not, they want like this hard concrete number.
Mm.
And cool, that's what they focus on. That's how they level their entire structure, like that's the nature of the beast. That's where you want to broaden your scope and apply to different places. If you start to get too specialized and you realize, oh well, they're really concerned about experience, and um, sometimes it's just the team, right? It's the way the team has been set up, where the senior people that they have like, they're all like at 5 to 7 years
Mm.
of UX related experience. And so that was like, I applied to this one company where that was the case, and I was like, and they said, oh well, you're not going to get a senior title despite you leading and doing managing and all of this stuff that you did, because you've actually only been in it for like, at that time it was like 2 years. So they were going to offer me more of a junior role, which is
Mm.
okay, cool, the pay was fine, but at the end of the day, like I didn't want to work for that company when I have other companies who will say, "Oh yeah, hire as a senior, cool, no problem." So sometimes it's just the nature of the beast. Some companies care about um, like work experience. Though what I've recently seen, like on job descriptions where you could start filtering early, is
Mm.
like they'll have like a statement saying, even if you don't meet all of these qualifications, we still encourage you to apply.
Oh yeah.
The companies that are they're more active, like the companies where requirements are not so hard and fast, like you want to look out for that. Like that's where reading the job description comes into play, or even looking at the structure of their team. So like if you see designers at Petco or something, and then all their designers have, their seniors have like 5 to 7 years of experience, like every single one of them. And then the juniors, have less than that. They have like all this experience. Then you could expect that they have like levels in place and they're very strict about their experience. But, again, it's just then broaden your scope, apply to other places, diversify your job search in different job like boards, um, to
Yeah,
help improve that and
cause,
combat that.
'cause that's a problem for me because I've switched over to product design and I used to work in graphic design for about like 7, almost 8 years now. And when
Yeah.
I was in university, there were no UX design courses. So I kind of feel like I entered in the industry very late, but I still have
Mhm.
transferable skills that are still applicable in these fields, right? So I have worked with like
Yeah.
developers before, but I just did not have like a UX title as like a job title.
Mhm.
So it's really hard for me to like leverage my experience and for that to be substantial because it's always about the case study, and because I hadn't had a
I
lot of
know.
projects as a graphic designer where I'm allowed to see this data, then I don't even know
Mhm.
how well my design projects actually took off when I actually was working as a professional. So it's really kind of
Oh, I
frustrating
know
for me where
that.
I've done good work for big companies and
Yeah.
I just don't have the data to prove that like it turned over a profit or how successful it was. So yeah, it's been
Mhm.
pretty kind of like frustrating for me finding like the right kind of job that sees my past as being like an asset, but you know, even if they have me on as a junior and I could still somehow work my way up to becoming a senior, because I do have skills of
Mhm.
like managing other people. I just don't want to stay as a junior designer forever. I just want to like be where I want to be and not have to like spend 10 years to get there.
I know. Yeah. Trust me. I literally had gone through those same loops applying for like senior roles. That's where you start to notice where the requirements are a little bit more strict.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I even on my portfolio, I don't have those old like websites that I designed, because
Mhm.
back then, or even branding, because it's hard to track those. And to be honest, I wasn't even monitoring them.
So even just like doing the volunteer work, including that on my resume, any kind of volunteer work, any kind of extracurricular activities. Sometimes you can't speak to the years, but like if you're showing that you're active in the community, like literally just for a recruiter call with Meta, um, he was like, it was specifically for mentorship and leadership, and I was like, I was able to speak to that because I did extracurricular activities. I'm leading and speaking, with Team GSD, and even though I didn't have like the 5 years that they're looking for, he still thought it was a good fit for the role. So it's still worth a try, like including everything that you can on your resume that's relatable, um, and then also too, with the levels, yeah, I would ask about the like job mobility, because you just have to hit a threshold. If it's not tied by years of experience, it's like, okay, well, what would it take to get, what does the path look like to land in the next level? It's like, what's the difference between a junior and a senior? If it's like, oh, not tied by years of experience, but they say, oh, you just have to lead a team, or you just have to lead a project, then you kind of know what you need to get done and like how quickly you can do that, or even asking how other people on the team got promoted, like what the trajectory and growth was like for past team members, and how um like that's where you can nip it in the bud right away, where it's like,
Right.
is it worth continuing the interview for this company if there's no like growth and mobility, and like you don't have to waste your time going through the interview loop.
Right, right.
Now that's again saying that from like a more privileged perspective. If you're like, if you have like, if you need a job, obviously you just got to get through it and see what lies on the other side, get your foot in the door, and then
Yeah.
switch career.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
switch roles. Yeah.
Yeah, those are all very good points. I'm gonna have to end the conversation now because we're a little bit over time. It was a very good, productive conversation. I'm glad that we had a lot of questions being asked, a lot of insights being shared. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rosie and Melissa. And yeah, thank our members. We had like a really excellent turnout. Very good. I'm so happy.
Thank you
um,
all for showing up. We appreciate the questions.
yes,
Yeah.
and as I'm gonna say again, we'll post this video on YouTube very soon. And if you want to follow Team GSD, they're on LinkedIn. I put the links inside the library. You got all the information that you need. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Good luck.
Bye.